In 1985, when Barry Minkow graduated high school, he was on top of the world.
If you're tired of going through the same problems every time you want your carpets cleaned, it's time you called.
The carpet cleaning business he started 2 years prior was booming and had recently expanded into insurance restoration. The next year, he would begin the process to take his business public, and his company's stock would reach $18 a share, and with the company's total value at $280 million. However, a scandal would lead to his company collapsing as quickly as it sprung up, and Minkow would find himself facing the inside of a prison cell. To find out how Minkow was able to build up such a large net worth at such a young age, and the deception that was needed, stay tuned and make sure to hit that bell and subscribe icon below. This is the evil economics of Barry Minkow. At the young age of 9, Barry Minkow's mother got him a summer job as a telesolicitor for the carpet cleaning company she worked for. This was primarily because the family couldn't afford to pay for babysitting services. The experience that Minkow gained from this role would form the basis for ZZZZ Carpet Cleaning, the company that he would form in the summer of his sophomore year of high school, using funds that he earned through working for his mother's employer and from a loan that he got from his grandmother. The competing carpet cleaning services in Los Angeles Valley tended to be mom and pop shops, which tended to use extensive use of bait and switch tactic, offering customers service at one price, then once work was completed, adding additional costs for the service. Minkow's company would offer customers a 2-room cleaning service for a flat rate of $39.95. In keeping the cost consistent and not nickel-diming his customers, Minkow's service became dominant and well-reputed, in contrast to his later actions. Minkow's business would suffer from a lack of funding early on, and as a result he would struggle to make payroll and cover basic business expenses. In order to remedy the lack of operating capital, Minkow would use a variety of illegal activities. One method was check kiting, which involves writing a check for an account with insufficient funds, then making use of the money while the check clears. Minkow would also sell the jewelry of family members, stage fraudulent break-ins to his business office in order to collect insurance payouts, and run out fraudulent credit card charges. It would be his involvement in insurance frauds that would lead Minkow further into his dark side. Minkow would end up branching ZZZZ into the insurance restoration business with the help of Tom Paget, an insurance claims adjuster. It was reported on the books that ZZZZ was cleaning and replacing carpets for homes and businesses that had been damaged due to flooding. The insurance work, much like the claims Minkow made of people breaking into his offices, was entirely fabricated. However, Paget would create several forged documents and invoices that showed ZZZZ was performing work for his firm. The two would even go so far as to create a fake company known as Interstate Appraisal Services, which was used as a third party to verify their services whenever Minkow would apply for a new loan. Barry Minkow would take ZZZZ public in January of 1986. The Ernst & Whitney accountant who audited ZZZZ before going public neglected to visit any sites from the insurance restoration work. Had he done so, he would have discovered a series of mailboxes throughout the San Fernando Valley. Minkow retained a controlling stake in his company with plans to sell off a large quantity of his stock once the 2-year holding period required by security laws at the time had passed. In Minkow's mind, he had figured out the solution to paying back the money he owed through the bad loans, and he was on track to going legitimate. However, Minkow sought an additional $15 million in his IPO, and as a result, accountants would take a closer look at his operations. Not to be undone by this scrutiny, however, Minkow created fake offices for interstate appraisal services and took auditors to a building under construction as having received restoration work, and he bribed the security guards there in order to get in. The accountants failed in their due diligence in part because of the thousands of forged documents that he had faked with the help of Tom Paget. As a result, Barry Minkow would become the youngest person to lead a company through IPO in history at the time, at just 20 years old. In February of 1987, ZZZZ stock was trading at $18 a share on the NASDAQ, and the company was valued at $280 million, $100 million of which was Minkow's stake. However, the company would be facing hard times in spite of the recent surge in valuation and inflow of capital, as Minkow paid investors a portion of the profits from the non-existent insurance restoration work, which at this point was accounting for 86% of the revenue on ZBest's books. To remedy this, Minkow entered talks for a merger with his company and KeyServe, which was the authorized carpet cleaner for Sears Co. The merger would have resulted in ZBest becoming the surviving brand, effectively giving him control over the Sears contract and making his company the largest carpet cleaning service in the nation. After news of the merger was announced, Minkow would make plans to expand internationally, and it would even float the idea of purchasing a Major League Baseball team. The credit card that Minkow used to fund his business early on would end up coming back to haunt him. When his victims began coming forward and demanding restitution, Minkow would use his usual charm to pacify them by blaming the charges on dishonest contractors and an employee whom he had terminated. Minkow would pay many of them back. The remaining unpaid victims, however, grouped together and went to the LA Times, which would publish an article on May 22, 1987 on the fraudulent charges, which totaled over $72,000. During a press conference on the day of the article's publication, while Minkow was attempting damage control, a reporter presented evidence that ZBest hadn't performed one of their restoration jobs, and further pointed out that ZBest wasn't even licensed to be doing large-scale restoration work in the first place. As a result, ZBest stock would fall 28% on the day that the article was published. Banks would call in their loans to ZBest, and financing for the deal with KeyServe would fall through. The accounting firm Ernst & Whitney, which had audited ZBest prior to it going public, also would begin taking a closer look at the insurance restoration contracts. Eventually, an unnamed employee of Minkow's would come forward and confess to being the author of the contracts. Ernst & Whitney would end up resigning from their position as ZBest's auditor and would fail to report their findings to the SEC for another month. Minkow resigned from his position on July 2, 1987, claiming health issues. A week earlier, an independent law firm hired by ZBest had asked him for the addresses where restoration work had taken place. Minkow gave them the addresses, knowing that they would be verifying that no restoration work had in fact happened. After Minkow's departure, the board would order an internal audit of the company's finances and would substantiate claims against Minkow. The board would sue Minkow, claiming that he had stolen $23 million in funds from the company. This, along with the loss in sales due to the amount of bad press the company had been receiving, forced ZBest into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In 1988, Minkow would be indicted on 54 counts, including racketeering, securities fraud, and embezzlement. Prosecutors alleged that Minkow was using his company to milk banks and investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars and emptied the company's accounts for personal gain. Minkow would claim that he had been forced to do so by organized crime elements, which forced him to do the Ponzi scheme. However, he would later admit that this was false. Minkow was found guilty on all counts and was sentenced to 25 years in prison and ordered to pay $26 million in restitution. While serving his sentence, Barry Minkow would convert to Christianity and complete the coursework through Liberty University to get involved in the Christian ministry. Minkow would get an early release from prison, having only served 7 years. He would become a pastor at a church in Chatsworth, California. One day, a church member would ask him to look into a money management firm that was handling their investments. In the course of investigating the company, Minkow would recognize many fraudulent actions made by the firm and reported them to authorities, revealing a $300 million Ponzi scheme. This would influence Minkow into creating the Fraud Discovery Institute, or FDI. The for-profit investigation firm would assist federal prosecutors in investigating white-collar crimes, with half of the team being released convicts and the other half being auditors. They would focus on penny stocks, which are oftentimes safe havens for fraudsters. Minkow claims that his work with the FBI uncovered over $1 billion in fraudulent dealings. However, much like the carpet cleaning business he started in his teens, FDI was just a cover for his own frauds. What the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and the FBI didn't know was that when Minkow was releasing reports to them, he was simultaneously short-selling stocks he knew would implode in value. Short selling involves paying a fee to utilize another's assets for a short time period, which can be anywhere from a few days to a 3-month quarter. One can then sell stocks at below market value to ensure that they are sold quickly before the stock value drops. Then the cash from the short selling is used to purchase the company's stock again, following the decline in value, allowing one to return stocks to the entity they were borrowed from, and leaving a hefty profit for the con man doing the short selling. During this time, Minkow would publish his findings on YouTube and his company FDI's website, and in some instances, as was the case with Herbalife, a multi-level marketing firm which sells dietary supplements, Minkow made accusations that they were in fact running a pyramid scheme, and that their supplements weren't in fact any better than others on the market, even though they were charging more. Herbalife would eventually pay him $300,000 to make him go away, and to avoid the time and expenses associated with a protracted litigation. Minkow's new schemes would eventually catch up with him when he targeted a major real estate developer named Lennar. Minkow claimed that Lennar was hiding an off-the-balance sheets Ponzi scheme. Language used by Minkow included a financial crime in progress and corporate bully. The rhetoric would cause Lennar shares to drop by 43% in just 2 weeks, from $11.57 a share to $6.55. Eventually, Lennar would take Minkow to court over the issue and produce documents showing that Minkow had purchased over $20,000 worth of options, which allowed him to sell Lennar shares at $11.57 even if the stocks fell in value. Then he later purchased stocks while it was down with the intent of selling it again once the report was proven false and the value of the stocks rebounded. Lennar would eventually be exonerated from any wrongdoing, and the judge would declare Minkow to be a liar in the courtroom. Minkow's troubles wouldn't end there, however. During his time as a pastor, Minkow had stolen over $3 million in church donations. He would also swindle individual church members out of their savings by talking them into donating for projects like a children's hospital in Sudan and a movie about Minkow's redemption story. The film about Minkow's redemption would eventually be released in 2018, and generally portrayed Minkow as constantly trying to be legit and standing up to prison bullies and investigating massive frauds during his time with the FDI. Interviews with those who knew Minkow, however, are also included in the film, and those who are interviewed unanimously doubt his prison redemption story and do not believe that he feels any remorse for his actions. Rather than fight the case prosecutors were mounting against him, Minkow pled guilty to bank fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and to defrauding the federal government. Minkow would be ordered to repay Lennar for their legal fees, which would amount to $583.5 million. He would also be ordered to pay the members of the church he had been a pastor of $3.4 million in restitutions. Since at the time of the court order, Minkow still hadn't paid back the $26 million he owed to ZZZZ investors, it's unlikely they will ever see any of that money again. Minkow would be sentenced to 2 concurrent 5-year prison terms, which would be the maximum sentence he could receive given that he had confessed. Minkow would be released from prison on June 6th of 2019. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching this presentation on the evil genius that is Barry Minkow. We hope that you enjoyed it, and if there's a company you'd like us to cover in the future, let us know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We will see you in the next one.